Welcome to Business Reporter's Best of British Business campaign. I'm Ramzan Karamali. Across the UK, social housing providers are facing a new regulatory reality. Compliance must be total, response times are shorter, and scrutiny is sharper than ever. For housing leaders, the challenge is no longer just delivering maintenance, but proving at any moment that every safety critical asset is compliant and properly managed. I'm joined by Graham Taylor, CEO of McIntyre Compliance Services. He argues that in this zero tolerance era, visibility defines safety, and that true compliance combines complete asset clarity, long-term planning, and a deeply human approach to residents. Graham, lovely to meet you. Now, can you explain what the compliance reality is for housing providers in today's situation?
Well, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to talk about compliance and all its areas. It's our passion. So coming on to social housing and compliance in that sector, we're making a very strategic change from an acceptance that broadly being compliant was the right answer to, with all the changes from the Building Safety Act coming into play, with AWAB's law coming into place. Providers have now got to demonstrate compliance at a level that they've not had to previously. So what do I mean by that? I mean, they need to be able to demonstrate that every asset that they own is being maintained effectively, is fit for purpose, and effectively being managed to look after the life safety in that property. One of the things that the Building Safety Act has really focused on, and AWAB's law, is that accountability level and accountability that customers should enforce within their providers. And therefore, it's not acceptable anymore to have a broad level of compliance and be seen to be having programs that support that. Now it's a strategic imperative for a social housing provider to be able to demonstrate at the asset level compliance.
Why is that visibility such a critical issue?
To be really simple about it, if you don't know the number of assets that you've got, there is no way that you can be able to demonstrate that each of these assets are compliant. In the grand scheme of these large tower blocks and social blocks, you will have hundreds of thousands of assets. And potentially there'll be assets for fire safety, for water, for emergency lighting systems. All of them are there for one reason only, and that's to keep the customer safe. And the challenge being, if you don't know and you don't have that list of all of those assets, then you're not maintaining necessarily those assets properly, you're not looking after them when they go into unserviceability, and the reality is you can't demonstrate that you are maintaining everything within that building envelope.
So where does McIntyre fit in this new landscape then?
So I suppose if you look at the amount of testing that our business does, we do 7,000 fire tests every single month. So scale that up, it's best part of 90,000 tests a year. So we need real size and scale, and we invest in a system and a platform that allows us to do that and gives us that visibility. I come from an aviation background. 100% was the only tolerable level of compliance. In social housing, in compliance sector now, 98% in anywhere else would be classed as exceptional. We could be 95%, an old FM background, that would be acceptable. There is no tolerance for anything other than 100% testing. So we need a system that can take into account the issue on that job, the issue on this job, so that we actually deliver that 100% compliance and that visibility to our customers. So
how does that visibility move housing providers from inspection to compliance?
Well, inspection, traditionally housing providers would have said there's your 100 or 1,000 tests to do, and that's what would have been the inspection. And we would go away and do that test. The reality is, of those 1,000 inspections, there is undoubtedly going to be follow-on works created. We will go to systems that aren't working, systems that have been vandalised, systems that actually need some minor replacement work. So we're moving away from just that pure inspection to that whole life. It's a serviceable item at the end of the day. Another aviation sort of motto was things are either serviceable or they're unserviceable. There's nothing in between in aviation, which you'd expect. And that's where we're getting to with compliance. The system is either working the way it was intended to and designed to, and it's fit for purpose, or there is a problem that needs fixing.
You talk about collaboration rather than transactional contracting.
Yes.
What does that collaboration mean in practice, though?
Well, collaboration is key to ensuring compliance. And that collaboration really consists of three main parties actually. First of all, there is the housing provider, the legal, the responsible owner of that level of compliance. And traditionally that would have been a housing provider and then a supplier like us, and it would have been those two. There's a third party in here that really comes into play and why we need to collaborate, and that's the end user. That end user needs to understand that when our fire alarm engineer turns up to inspect something in their flat, we're not doing that to be intrusive. We're not doing that because we're generally nosy. We're not doing that because we want to find out anything about you other than have you got your life safety system working properly in your flat. So collaboration has become really key in the industry because you don't get into these properties without talking to the end user. Our end user is naturally suspicious in many cases that somebody in a work uniform with a clipboard has come to inspect something in their home. So we need to do that education, and that's part of what we've been doing. We have user forums, we have coffee mornings with residents. We do quite a lot of work on fire safety in particular, and an understanding of that, whether that be your fire doors or whether that's your emergency lighting system. And by doing that level of collaboration, actually everybody becomes safer and the job becomes that little bit easier.
So how do you keep on top of technological and regulatory changes then?
So, there's a real focus from us on having the right tech. Tech's the big word, but actually tech's very much probably a third of the story. A lot of it is all about the human interaction and the nature there. So we spend a lot of time training our engineers, but also training our office staff. So our office staff need to understand when an engineer cannot attend or cannot achieve the goal of something being serviceable, what's the next steps? Does that mean we have to put a waking watch in? Does that mean we have to put something in there temporarily? Do we need to phone the customer and say we've got something which is potentially unsafe and we need your authorization to approve something? So we don't employ a load of administrators, we employ qualified fire safety planners, in particular, who will focus on, okay, we cannot do that work, what's the next steps to ensure that we are keeping that customer safe? And that's been quite successful. Alongside all of that, we do the training with our engineers, we do the training with our office staff, and we do training with our customer as well. We're just about to run a load of building safety awareness workshops with our customer and our engineers and our office staff in the next couple of months. And we spent a lot of time collaborating with ACO, who are a provider of domestic fire alarm smokes, and we're one of their platinum partners now. So what does that mean? It means actually that there's 20 in the country, I believe now, who are qualified at the highest level to do the ACO installation work in domestic properties, focused on not just the fire safety, but also when it comes to damp and mould provision and the environmental sensors that we're putting in there.
And finally, Graham, from your vantage point, do you think social housing is becoming safer? Are the changes to regulations making a difference on the ground?
I think it's taken time. I think we are starting to see a real change in focus on safety. And the reason why it's taking time is there is a huge cultural change to be had. The voice of the customer. People used to call people tenants, then they became residents. Now we've naturally moved into customer. Talking about customers is much easier than talking about tenants. Tenants gives you the impression that actually they're not, they don't have the same gravitas as a customer. So they're now customers. And I think, with their focus, with their empowerment, and the government has done quite a bit to empower them through the Building Safety Act and AWAB's law, you are starting to see now a higher level of compliance. And I think over the next few years, as the culture continues to improve in these organisations and organisations like ourselves, I think the compliance space will be much better for it.
Graham Taylor from McIntyre Compliance Services, many thanks for your time.
Thank you.